remember, this video is probably going to be a bit annoying. What it will help you do is understand what those numbers actually mean and how to make better career decisions off the back of them. I'm Ben, a founder and former head of product at a publicly traded B2B SaaS company. Now, I teach product managers the stuff that I wish someone had taught me when I started out. A lot of LinkedIn advice around product manager salaries optimizes for clicks. It focuses on the far right tail of the distribution and is a product of audience capture. Basically, it's aspirational income porn, and it doesn't apply to more than 90% of product managers. The bad news is that even if you are a well-tenured, high-performing product manager, you probably still aren't going to earn anything close to the numbers that you'll see floating around on the posts by LinkedIn influencers. The good news is that just because those astronomical numbers are probably unattainable for most people, and by extension, probably you, that doesn't mean that you can't earn a genuinely good living in product management. And if you are prepared to make lifestyle arbitrage, like living in a cheaper city or even outside major US metros, you can earn a really good living. Remote culture does ebb and flow. And right now, I think it's fair to say that we're at an ebb. But over the last 30 years, the broader trend has been towards more flexibility and not less. As a starting point, let's look at some snapshots of real salaries from Levels.fyi. Across the United States, the median product manager, their total compensation is just under $225,000. For perspective, the median US house price is about $435,000. Ignoring debt, you could reasonably afford that median house within 3 to 4 years. If we zoom in on specific cities, assuming no remote work, in New York, the median total compensation is about $205,000 with a median house price of around $900,000. In the Bay Area of San Francisco, you're looking at over $300,000 in total compensation, but median house prices rise. They're roughly $1.3 million. In Australia, the median product manager total compensation is just under $170,000 Australian. In my hometown of Sydney, go the Swans, the median house price is over $1.7 million AUD, which is not great as a ratio. Now, these are just a few data points among many, and they also don't account for something that's really important, which is that people often establish themselves in high-paying local markets and then later transition to remote work, effectively cashing out into a lower cost of living. At this point, some of you are probably looking at those numbers and thinking that you are being ripped off in your current product management job. Look, if you have offers on the table from other employers trying to pry you away from your current job, then by all means march into your boss's office and negotiate hard and leave if you have to. But if you don't, it's worth slowing down because these numbers tell you very little about what fair compensation looks like for your role. And that's what this video is about. Even objective data like Levels.fyi and Glassdoor, they're self-reported and they're opt-in datasets. That doesn't make them useless, but it does mean that they are non-random samples and they're subject to predictable biases. The first bias is sample bias. Proactive people are more likely to submit on these sites. These are career optimizers, people who are mobile, compensation aware, and they're actively negotiating. If your dataset overrepresents ambitious, negotiation savvy PMs, it can be honest and still skew higher than the true average. And a bigger issue is what people report versus what they don't. These figures are total compensation. They're not base salary. Most people anchor to their base salary and then they compare it to total compensation averages and feel like they're being hard done by. On top of that, people systematically report their best years and not their baseline years. This is classic recall and salience bias. They remember strong bonuses and high equity valuations, and they ignore vesting cliffs, low bonus years, or underwater equity. Equity, of course, does not equal liquidity, and that's an important consideration. Vesting doesn't equal realization. Bonuses aren't guaranteed, and yes, ego also plays a role. Even in anonymous surveys, people tend to present themselves in a favorable light. They anchor themselves to aspirational identities. They selectively report information that reinforces their sense of being above average. But there's one more important structural distortion. Timing matters more than most people realize. People are most active in submitting compensation data during hot job markets because that's when job switching is at its highest point. Job switching correlates with higher compensation jumps, better bonuses, and higher equity valuations. And those are precisely the moments when people are motivated to benchmark their pay and submit data. So these datasets are much better at capturing transition compensation rather than steady state compensation. And they don't tell you a great deal about what pay looks like when the market is bad. Even if the data were perfect, there is a bigger problem with using it. As a product manager, you are not the average. Your compensation depends heavily on where you sit once you start segmenting properly. First, decision-making leverage. People obsess over titles and levels. Associate product manager, senior product manager, principal, head of product, CPO. What matters far more is how much decision ownership you have and the blast radius of your calls. A useful rule of thumb is that pay tracks consequence, not title. If you're making decisions that material affect revenue, pricing, retention, or cost structures, then you're going to be paid more as a product manager. If you're effectively project managing feature requests in a sales-led business with skinny margins, then you're going to get paid less. So, do you influence pricing or packaging? Do you affect renewals or enterprise deals? Are your mistakes expensive, and are your wins monetizable? If so, the market pays for that. Risk is another factor on that same coin. High total compensation often reflects volatility, venture-backed companies burning cash, public companies under pressure, or businesses hiring ahead of their revenue curve. For more stable, profitable businesses, they're usually going to pay less, but the money is real and predictable. Timing matters as well. I've hired product managers across multiple cycles, and the same role can attract very different candidates at very different pay, depending on the time in the business cycle it is. In a hot market, companies are willing to throw stupid money at people because they are desperate. In cold markets, hiring managers have far more leverage and they will use it. Geography and remote work still matter too. Cities anchor pay bands. Remote flexibility has currency, and employers price that currency in by giving you a lower salary. You can be paid very well remotely, but you'll often be trading brand prestige or stability for flexibility. So it's always a balancing act. When people say that a company pays well or pays poorly, they're collapsing dozens of variables into a single number. LinkedIn amplifies this problem enormously. In my experience, everyone hates LinkedIn in real life. It's a cynical, self-aggrandizing, dishonest, back-patting, nauseating circle jerk of a platform that optimizes for aspiration, outrage, and often unverifiable anecdotes, and I find them to be the most infuriating. People eat it up because they want to be boosted by that influencer, and also because they want to believe that they too could land that $750K role at Google that this influencer has claimed to have helped people get when everything looked hopeless for their client in the first instance, before talking to them, of course. At best, these posts collapse edge cases into advice and confuse storytelling with repeatability and make genuinely good careers feel like failures by comparison because you're not getting $750K. And frankly, some of them read less like edge cases and more like complete fabrications. So, what to actually do with all of this discrepancies and the different signals that you're dealing with as a product manager, just trying to work out what you should be paid and trying to negotiate a good salary. First point, if you're renegotiating pay, be honest about what your leverage actually is. Use data, but temper it for your industry, your role, your risk profile, and timing. There's nothing worse than going into a negotiation hot and realizing that you don't actually have any cards when you're at the bargaining table. Then focus in on everything you can point to that measurably demonstrates your impact on the company's profitability. Think revenue, cost savings, NPS improvement as a forward indicator of retention, and have counterfactual comparators to hand of what would have happened if you weren't there, and by implication, what would happen if you were to leave. This is how you subtly build a business case that you're worth more money. You don't do it by pointing out how hard you work or what a good soldier you've been, and you definitely don't do it by pointing to a vague average that probably doesn't apply to you that you've got from Glassdoor or Levels. If you're choosing between jobs, think about decision-making power, learning rate, risk tolerance, lifestyle, and long-term optionality. Some roles pay more because they're closer to revenue and involve harder decisions. Others pay less because they're lower stress or more stable. And both of them can lead to very good lives, depending on what you value. Basically, LinkedIn influencers are bullshit, Levels and Glassdoor are misleading and incomplete. There you go, like and subscribe.